Hello, welcome back to Sushi Live Noding. In this episode, I'm gonna talk a bit about just a little bit of nodings and coding. Basically, talking about selected objects and also active objects. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm gonna start from empty Blender scene. So I'm gonna delete everything except the cube, and we're gonna talk about how an object is can be selected, can be active using nodes and also using codes, Python codes. So let's see and have a look. So in Blender, you can have definitely you can have many objects, and then with many objects, they can be active or they can be selected. And how do you know that an object is active or selected? Normally, the indicator is that the ones that's selected is usually orange color, and the one that's active is this guy right here. It's a bit more yellow, a bit brighter. If you look at also in the outliner, the indicators of objects that's active is the one that's white color. Let's say for this cube, the master cube, if we have a different, if we have like a material, or they are currently using the same material, I'm gonna delete everything and create a couple more cube. So if we have this guy being selected and this one's being active, which is, you can see here, it's white color, is active. If we control L, we can connect the material of the active objects into the rest of the objects. So that's actually very, very handy for a lot of reasons. But regarding selected and active, we can also check it using Python code. And the quick way to get the list of currently selected objects is to use bpy data context or bpy context selected objects. So that will actually give you a list of objects that's currently being selected. While to get the active object, we can use bpy context scene object active. So this is how we can actually tell which object is currently active. Of course, in this case, cube. If we change it and then try to query again, and now we can see object that's active is cube 004. Okay, so let me save that. This is node and code selected active. So why is it selected and active kind of interesting? Because when you start to deal with a lot of objects, this can be it can be hard to select an object, and then sometimes you actually want to use either Python codes to select an object. Let's say you want to select, but there is also another way. If you want to select an object very, very quickly, you can use Blender select by pattern. And this is also, of course, very handy. You can select by pattern, and then you specify, like, if you want Suzanne, select all Suzanne. You can just Suzanne and then give a star. Now you select all Suzanne. If you want to select the cube, let's say just the cube that's not the master, that's mean the cube with the .00 digit, you can have a dots there. So that way you can have them selected. Okay, so that's really, really handy. You can also select object if they have the same material. You can just Shift L and then select object link with link material. So that will come in handy. There is a way to do this using Sverchok nodes as well. So let's say the quickest and the easiest way to quickly select object is to use objects in. So this is something that can be really handy. Say, let's say you have a bunch of objects selected, and you kind of want to keep the selection. You can just get those, and you can see here under objects in, you have the objects now listed here. Let's say I'm making a different selections, and then I get the selection using another node. I get a different list. Let me try one more time. I will select using C, just paint it. Now I have those being selected. I have another nodes. I can get them as well. Different lists once again. And if you save the blend, and if you have this Sverchok add-on installed, this guy will kind of like a semi-permanent. They are always there as long as you keep it. Whenever you want to make a different like selections, you can just click on that button, select objects. So that's definitely something that comes in handy. And this select object is actually kind of additive. So if you want to get rid of them, you hit A and then clear the selections and then select the objects. But if you want to combine the selection, you just click on this button. And you can also use grouping to do the selections. But there's also another interesting thing. If you want to kind of query objects that's being selected or not, you can use object ID set. So this one is of course similar to Python. If I have some objects selected, and if we query whether an object is selected or not, we can use, there's an attribute called select. So if we have like this is cube 004, cube 004. If we say, if we query this value, it's gonna say true. See, actually, we need to use out values. It's gonna say true. If I deselect and then update, this one will say false. So for if I now use another, if I'm using object selector, this will grab by default, it will grab all the object mesh, and we can query all of them, and then you can see it all says false. But if I select a bunch of objects and update it, it's gonna say true, false. Some of them is gonna be true and some of them is gonna be false. The one that's true is actually being selected. So that's will come in handy at some point. And also to find out which one that's currently active, or to set which one that's active, you can use a formula for that. So BPY context scene objects active. This one will give us one active object. There can be only one object that's active. So that's very, very important. I think that's what else can we do? We can also do a quick filtering if you like. So if we have nothing selected, right, and we want to filter the monkey, for example, we use a filter object ID filter. So first of all, this one will grab all the mesh objects that's in the scene. We plug this into that guy, and if we say Suzanne or Suzanne dot, it's gonna select only Suzanne with dots. So Suzanne.001, Suzanne.002. If we use the stethoscope, have a look, we're gonna get that Suzanne only two Suzanne. And if you ever want to select those Suzanne, we can use this guy right here. Select. We just need to set it to true. And those two Suzanne will be selected. If we change this to cube, now we are selecting the cube. But you can see the effect is kind of additive. If I deselect first, updates, now those guys will be selected. So we can separate them. So that's based on because of this, we change the attribute of select to true. So it's like a trigger, like an on and off. Yeah, I guess that's I think that's pretty much it. it's actually can be very useful if you have like a bunch of object selected, so you can kind of query, okay, we know that some objects are currently being selected, so we want to know the objects that's actually selected. We want to do something to those objects, for example. So these objects, and then we are querying, okay, are those objects selected? And the output's gonna be true or false. Let me update it. Select equal true, or oh, wait. There you go. True, 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 true. Okay, those 5 objects. Oh, that's because I'm using objects in. So that's not what I want. I need to use this guy, object ID selector. From 11 objects, give me a true and false, whether they are selected or not. And based on those, we want to kind of mask our objects. So we can use filter, object ID filter. So this will grab all of them, but using this mask, true or false, we can then kind of only get 4 objects currently being selected. I can get 1 torus and 1 monkey head, actually get 1 each, and then update it. So 1, 2, 3 updates. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, because of this guy, I need to disconnect first. 1, 2, 3. Now we can see only 3 objects we are already filtering, right? And then with those objects already filtered, we can then do things like subdivide or give it like a different color or things like that. Yeah, I think that's covering pretty much everything I want to talk about objects being selected or being active, or whether if you ever want to quickly select objects procedurally using nodes, you can use this select objects. I'm pretty sure those will come in handy. Currently still kind of maybe a little bit confusing or a little bit, oh, that's a bit hard, right? But when it comes to, if you have like hundreds of objects, and let's say you have like so many objects in the scene, and let's say you say, I want to select all the objects that's actually with the positions lower than 0 or underneath the floor or something. So in the end, you want to get something like this, and you want to kind of delete them or something. You can do that quite easily, whether you are using Python to get the list and then use a Python code, or you can also use nodes. Nodes sometimes can be easy, sometimes can be not, but you can actually do that. You can query an object. So let me give a quick example. So we know that we can do the masking based on selections. Let's turn that off. Let's do the masking based on position, for example. So objects, get the objects and get the location, and then just quickly query the locations. So vector out. We know the location is a vector. The output's gonna be a vector. Yeah, we need to do that. And let's check the position. So if the position is lower than, if the z position is lower than 0, so if the z is actually lower than 0, give a return of value, true or false. And now we can query that very, very easily. So with those that actually true, we can select them. So objects have, let me quickly check what's happening just now. So these objects, for these objects, we want to make the selection to true. Oh, it says error. Name true is not defined. Okay, should be true then. So we have nothing selected, updated. Now we have objects that underneath being selected. Believe it or not, this will update automatically. So we have many objects down there and many up there. If we update the setup now, it will only select objects with locations under 0. Oh, this guy. Now, there you go. That seems to be happening. So there's a lot of talk and a lot of different abstract example, but it's gonna make sense eventually if you ever want to query objects that's based on something and you kind of do the masking. This is how you do it using nodes. Maybe at some point I will talk again about this, but I think this can be handy at some point. Hopefully you find this useful. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Bye.